Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. The fallout from massive farm parties continues. State lawmakers are looking at closing a legal loophole after WRAL Investigates reporting on this story. WRAL's Sarah Krueger joins me to talk through what that change could look like. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so can you tell us about these parties and your past coverage for people who may have missed it?
Yes, so we've been doing a number of stories over, more than a month now about just really large parties that are happening on farms or, like big fields. And primarily what we've been hearing about are college students who are renting out these fields or these farms and, bringing in alcohol, having underage drinking, and just causing a number of safety issues and security concerns. We've been hearing from law enforcement about those and neighbors about those, everything from just concerns about the really loud noise to concerns about some of the party goers drinking and then wandering down these dark rural roads and then just drain on law enforcement resources, causing all kinds of deputies and police officers to respond and really pulling a lot of county's resources all to one location. So very concerning to a lot of people. And we have been doing multiple stories about this, parties in Durham County and Orange County and just various efforts to try to get these under control.
Right. And I know that in one of those cases, I believe it's the one in Orange County, there's a property owner who faces charges. So what are those charges and sort of what are, I guess, like the legal abilities to address this problem right now?
Yeah, so in one party in particular that was in Orange County at a farm, the owner of that farm is facing 7 counts of aiding and abetting drinking, and that was all related to one party at Smokehouse Valley Farm in Orange County. And the Orange County Sheriff's Office was really sounding the alarm about this party in particular because he says there were more than 2,500 people there and more than 70 calls to 911, and we got a lot of those calls through a public records request, and they were just so alarming to hear about. Like, there was a pregnant woman who was having contractions and couldn't get out of her driveway, and neighbors really concerned about the traffic, and multiple party goers I later found were charged with DWI and with underage drinking. So it was just a really big event that disturbed a lot of people in that neighborhood. So that case in particular is still moving its way through the court system. And so, law enforcement as it stands does have teeth to enforce things like underage drinking, obviously DWI. In my conversations with various law enforcement, though, they just worry, with the size of these parties, like this one we just mentioned, 2,500 plus people, like that's a lot of people to try to contain, and they often feel like they don't have the resources to go in and do what they need to do in those types of situations. And so they had been hoping for some time now for some help from lawmakers, and maybe that could be coming.
Okay, and so how did you find out that state lawmakers were looking at ways to respond to your reporting here?
Yeah, so in doing, my reporting on a number of these stories, I heard over and over from different community groups and neighbors that, like, one of the issues here is the agritourism law and it just being too broad and enabling parties like this to really happen. And so after hearing the agritourism law over and over, I started doing some research into it, and I actually just went up to our political team because our Capitol team, they are so knowledgeable, and I asked them, hey, who's really like the person I should talk to about the agritourism law? And so they told me, Senator Brent Jackson, who represents parts of eastern North Carolina. Like, he is a farmer, and he is very involved in agritourism laws. So I called him, and he said, I've seen your stories. And actually, because of your stories, I am having meetings with lawmakers, with community stakeholders, and I'm trying to do something about this. I'm trying to close the loophole because really agritourism what he told me, when he promoted this years ago, like the idea was that he was thinking of strawberry picking and, class field trips to farms, like very educational, like clearly educational things. And the fact that now that agritourism through a loophole is being used to promote or enable these parties was just really shocking and disturbing to him. And in his eyes, that is definitely not agritourism. And it's something that he's hoping he and other lawmakers can put their heads together on and try to figure out a solution.
Okay, let's take a quick break right there and we'll be right back. Okay, Sarah, so before the break, you were talking about agritourism and how the laws around that in our state could be creating a loophole for these massive farm parties. So what do we know about the law? As you said, it's intended for educational things, picking strawberries, school visits, that kind of thing. What does it say, and I guess where does the loophole come in?
Yeah, so I just pulled up the text of the law because I don't have it memorized yet. It's kind of long, but the law basically state law defines agritourism, and I'm kind of summarizing a little here, but as any activity that allows members of the public for recreational, entertainment, or educational purposes to view or enjoy rural activities. And so critics of that law say that's really broad, and it's enabling things like these farm parties because I guess, the owner of the farm can say like, oh yeah, well, maybe they're here because I have cows over there and they want to, I don't know, enjoy their beer while they're looking at a cow. So that's, I think, the first sort of avenue that lawmakers are looking at is like, yes, it's a little too broad. And so how do we try to hone that in? And one thing that Senator Jackson was telling me, he is a farmer. He said this is really a small number of people who are abusing the law. And so that's what's really making it tricky for him is like he does not want to, shut down the strawberry picking or the class field trips. Like that all is something that's really important to him that he wants to be possible. And so that's what's been a challenge, he said, is just figuring out like how do we close the loophole and maybe, more specifically define agritourism in a way that would prevent, alcohol and underage drinking and like late at night parties without hurting the others who are using the law as it was intended.
Right. And so who is he sort of talking to try to figure out the best way to approach this?
Yeah, so the day that I interviewed him just recently in the legislature, he was having a meeting later that day actually with Senator Greg Meyer, who represents Orange County, and he's involved, Senator Meyer, because there have been a number of parties in Orange County. That's one of the counties we know this is happening in. I've also covered it in Durham and then heard anecdotally about it happening in other places as well. So I know that he was meeting with Senator Meyer and also with the Orange County Sheriff, Charles Blackwood. I asked if I was invited to that meeting. I was not, so I can't report back on exactly what was said. But I know that they were all coming together to try to find a solution. And, one thing that Senator Jackson did say is that in the meantime, before they change the law, or if they're going to change the law, he does feel like law enforcement has enough power right now with the laws that are on the books to still shut down these parties, still enforce things like the noise ordinance, enforce underage drinking. So that is something that he hopes can at least fill in until there's a more perhaps permanent solution.
All right. And what are sort of the next steps for you in your reporting on this right now?
Yeah, and sorry, I just realized one thing I should say, so let me just get this in. Why the agritourism designation would be, I guess, helpful, quote unquote, to those who are hosting these parties. So if you have an agritourism designation, you skirt county zoning ordinances and building codes. So that would make it easier. You wouldn't have like a limit on the number of people or the number of parking spaces you have to have or the number of porta potties you have to have. So it just makes it a little more loose. And I think that's just important context I wanted to just add in there.
Absolutely.
But as far as what's next. I'm still just checking in with Senator Jackson and seeing where these changes in the law might progress, if they progress. So we'll be following that, and of course, we'll update you all.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. We appreciate your reporting on this. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us a part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with triangled news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.